This podcast is brought to you by True Resources, connecting talented people with the best mining employers in the Australian market. For more information, head to trueresources.com.au. Hello, I'm Ben Kosterich, and this is the Marketbull podcast. Joining me on the show today remotely is Ward Detwiler, the Chief Business Officer, and Susan Harvey, the Medical Affairs Advisor for Imagion Biosystems. Now, this is a really interesting area of cancer detection, and the company is listed on the ASX under code IBX. Now, it's an early stage biotech company, and both Ward and Susan are here to talk to me a little bit more about it. So welcome to the show, both of you.
Hey, thanks, Ben. Thanks for having us.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Now, if I start with Ward, yourself, your experience, you've worked within the bio scene for a numerous amount of years and had quite a fair amount of success in raising capital and just elevating projects and companies. But talk us through a little about your history and the path that led you towards your current role.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, I've pretty much been in the medical device or medical technology area of my whole career, really focusing on early stage technologies, bringing them kind of from concept into the market. Most recently, I was the co-founder and CEO of another MRI company, really focused on rapid quantitative imaging. And after joining Imagion last year, well, I guess really what kind of caused me to join it and got me so excited was that background and seeing the Imagion technology, seeing what the potential for it was in turning MRI from something that was a sort of a qualitative anatomical tool where you're assessing things visually into something that could be a true, highly specific diagnostic. I was like, this is amazing. This is really the key and really the next step of the evolution of MRI. So I think it was really that background that got me so excited and hopefully bring some of that mindset to the company.
And from the sounds of it, so when did you officially join the company and come on board?
I joined last spring. I can't actually remember exactly when because I've been talking with Bob for a while, talking about the technology and the company and the pathway. And it really seemed like things were on the upswing and there was a lot of potential there. And it got me excited to make the leap and come on board and join them.
And I know, Susan, you've joined the company recently in your position, but you've had quite a deep-rooted and connection towards cancer and research and this realm. And I think if you don't mind, just for those that aren't familiar with yourself as well and your story, which I think is quite impressive and quite touching, can you talk us a little bit about yourself and how this opportunity and almost, opportunity arose?
Yeah, so I'm trained as a physician and I've worked at academic centers, so very specialized in breast imaging. The last 15 years of my 30 years of imaging was at Hopkins, which was incredible because there is so much to Hopkins. So my research focused outside of radiology, essentially. I worked in oncology, and this is all collaborative. I'm not suggesting I did this work, but as a team member, we developed a rapid molecular diagnostic for breast cancer and other cancers. I worked in biomedical engineering and we spun off several devices and also at the applied physics lab at Johns Hopkins. So my work has been considering how do we provide breast cancer care globally, but also what is the next jump in what we can do to improve patient care? And so this company, as Ward has alluded to, makes perfect sense. It takes a good deal of the uncertainty out of the patient journey, which is so important. And I will share, and I share this, and I know some people find it very personal, but it has impacted my life. In 2019, I was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. So I was a provider and a patient, and understanding it's the small stuff as a patient. It's that extra surgical procedure, that uncertainty, that wait time that is so agonizing. So this company, and I am a volunteer. This company does what I want to see happen in the world of cancer care. And I'm fortunate to be part of this group.
So if I strip it back to, again, what this company is doing, and really we could say the current diagnosis and treatment pathways that many go through, if we set the stage for those, and in particular, probably highlighting a few of the cancers that are in focus, what is the current process that so many patients, probably like yourself, would have gone through this probably quite tumultuous period of time?
Well, let me share a story of a patient that I saw. So, young woman raising 3 kids by herself. Her work was at the very high end of horse show training. And so, in demand and traveling a ton, trying to balance a lot of hard physical work with the rest of her family life. She felt a lump in her breast. Took her several months to come in and sort out what the problem was. So many women have these delays. By the time she got to us, she had a 2 centimeter cancer, and it was biopsy proven. It was fairly high grade, and every imaging study we did, mammography, ultrasound, and breast MRI, showed that the axilla was normal, absolutely
Mm.
normal, but it was a large tumor, right? In the US, with screening programs, we're used to seeing 10 millimeter tumors. This was twice that size. And her surgical team just they weren't able to believe the imaging, to trust the imaging, which makes a whole lot of sense. So before any chemo was started, before they did anything, they took her to the operating room and did a sentinel lymph node biopsy. So they injected radioactive material as well as methylene blue, sampled lymph nodes, and this took a long time to schedule. All the nodes were negative. By the time she got back to us, her tumor had increased about 20% in size. It's a very aggressive tumor. They went forward with chemo, mastectomy, etc., but that additional surgery impacted her life and her recovery. And all this to say, normal lymph nodes, she died 2 years later. So essentially, what we did in this process, because of a lack of specificity and accuracy, is we subjected her to a surgery she didn't need, to medical cost. And so that's the idea. How can we improve this? How can we come up with technologies like MagSense so that people can trust them and we can proceed with surgery at, and chemo when needed without adding to the patient's burden?
Mm.
Um, and I can
Yeah.
certainly, Ben, go on about the standards of care and the challenges that exist with them. But I think the point here is we need accuracy in order to be able to provide very personalized care to women
So
that
that
allow.
probably Yes, that probably ties in a little bit then to what Imagion Biosystems is. So I wasn't really familiar until we sort of engaged over email, and this whole realm of evolving medicine. It's such an interesting, I guess, industry, because so much of it is rooted in sort of routine and what has been done for hundreds and thousands of years, and innovation is almost the last thing that is adopted. And realistically, now with technology, it's a no-brainer. But if someone's never heard of the company, I mean, Ward, how do you best describe what it's trying to achieve and do in this next frontier of cancer diagnosis?
Yeah. So I guess at the high level, Imagine is a clinical stage medical imaging company, really with a mission on improving cancer staging, cancer diagnosis, ultimately enable better, more accurate, faster care. We do this through the use of molecular MRI, specifically something that are called spions, these super paramagnetic iron oxide nanoparticles, which is a tiny, tiny, tiny piece of iron that
Mm.
really what our expertise is in is how to make these, how to make them standardized and repeatable, that are then coated with a targeting compound, a targeting ligand. Um, And whatever we put on to that little particle, it will then find its way and tag itself to specific cancer cells. So what makes this so different is if you look at the existing forms of medical imaging out there, whether it's MRI, standard MRI, CT, ultrasound, PET, X-ray, these are all kind of like anatomical imaging techniques where um, you're seeing an image, you're seeing a piece of the human anatomy, whether it's a tumor, it could be whatever. And as a radiologist, you're having to make a kind of qualitative assessment of what you're seeing. Is that abnormal and what that might be? And then
Mm.
using other information and coming up with what's my ultimate decision? What's the call here? What makes this so different is that, iron-based imaging has been around for a long time. We know the signature of it. These particles have a unique uh, magnetic signature that we see through MRI. And because of that targeting compound that we put on it, we know that if you see that particle, you see that unique signature on the MRI, you know that you're seeing it because there are specific types of cancer cells there. Having to make a guess about what might be going on, you can say, well, that's because, in this case, for our first indication, oh, this is HER2 positive breast cancer. But what's really exciting is that we can do this with almost, any cancer that we can find a targeting ligand for. So we have two other indications in the works already that we've done preclinical work on and are ready to kind of go through this clinical development path. So prostate cancer and ovarian cancer. But again, if we find new technologies, we're a small company, we can't take on everything by ourselves all at once, but we can certainly pursue those paths. And then what's most exciting, if you look kind of out into the future, is that this could even become a vehicle, kind of a platform for therapeutic delivery, so targeted delivery of therapeutics. So not only could you diagnose, you could potentially treat. Um, that's probably a little bit ways in the
The
future.
future
But
conversation. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, but it's exciting about what kind of the potential for this technology is, um, and just in kind of just in what we have on our plate at the moment and what you're able to do with this data, how you're able to now quantify what you're seeing, the potential to add, AI tools and diagnostics on top of that to make interpretation easier, to make sure that we're having just a more specific, more accurate diagnosis.
So with the targeting ability, you said prostate and ovarian cancer. Excuse my ignorance for this, but I'm assuming therefore then there's certain, I guess, characteristics that are identifiable that then are sort of added to this to then figure out where it is, particularly in the human anatomy, or how does this sort of go about? I can already see how the efficiencies would be improved in just detecting it, but yeah, talk us through, and that's a long way away, but how does that sort of targeting system all somewhat work in a way?
So I want to bring us back to breast cancer and show the exact examples and then expand onto where could this go. So
Yeah.
human epidermal growth factor receptor 2, HER2, is a protein that sits on the cell surface.
Mhm.
And this is seen in breast cancer, about 20% of breast cancers. Those breast cancers tend to be quite aggressive because HER2 stimulates tumor growth. But HER2 is on multiple other cancers as well, solid tumors, GYN cancers, um, the pancreatic, gallbladder, uh, lung cancers, all kinds of different cancers. So the potential for the future. We'll step back again to breast imaging and give the example. So there are categories of imaging that take place
Mm.
in breast, and this is true in all human imaging. For example, Ward referred to anatomic imaging. So mammography and ultrasound are anatomic imaging tools. They're used very broadly for the detection of cancer. What the radiologist is, or the interpreter is trying to do, is sort out normal anatomy and the wide variations of normal anatomy from abnormal. And
Mm.
all we've got is those differences. So a cancer may have spiculation. So that means it looks like a star. So your eyes are seeking a change in the anatomic flow. Again, that happens in normal architecture. So we have the challenge of the variation in normal, but also the human subjectivity and variation in interpretation. So that's one category, anatomic alone. Another category is Ward has mentioned MR and CT, MRI and CT. Those use contrast material. That contrast material is tracking blood flow, right? So cancers stimulate blood flow, neovascularity. So cancers tend to be very vascular. There are some exceptions, but the generalization is this works because cancers are vascular. The challenge is there are many other things that are vascular. In the breast, for example, there are multiple benign processes, not cancerous processes, fibroadenomas. Normal hormonal stimulation of breast tissue can make breast tissue enhance. So when you're using vascularity, you generate a lot of false alarms and false positives. So that's a huge challenge. So we've got anatomic, vascular, and then we can also look at PET, for example. So PET is the use of glucose. It's an active, right? It's an activity that's churning. So we get that in cancers, we get that in infections, we get that in healing fractures, those sorts of things, healing wounds, healing fractures. So again, there's a lack of specificity. We can have a lot of false positives. When we use tools like MagSense that are very specifically targeting, in this case, HER2, then we know that the only thing that is uptaking is something that has the HER2 protein sitting on the cell surface. So it advances hugely the ability to be accurate, both based on sensitivity, finding the lesion, and specificity, not mixing that lesion up with something else that's unrelated to cancer. So this type of activity is going on in medicine and in imaging quite broadly. An example is prostate-specific membrane antigen, which was actually developed by a colleague of mine, and it's working better than PET for prostate cancer. We're approaching the same thing. And this concept of theranostics, and yes, it's not the terrible company, right? It is a whole area of medicine where we, in the future, I'm not saying this is happening right now, but in the future, we're able to very, like a magic bullet, find the cancer and tag something that could treat the cancer in the same way. So again, I'm speaking about the future, but the drive to find this comes out of the limitations of imaging that currently exists. So I've alluded to this in breast cancer. There are many other cancers that carry HER2, some of which are extremely difficult to diagnose early. Ovarian cancer, right? Ovarian presents at late stage when women have symptoms. Pancreatic cancer also has HER2. So the future of this is huge, and it is future. It's not what's being offered now, but it is what brings so much excitement to this sort of work. So that was a lot. I'll stop and give
No,
someone
I
else a
think
chance.
that was incredibly well said, because I think for many, especially understanding medicine, and I think almost everyone has ever has met or heard of someone that has suffered from cancer, and a lot of the constant discussion is that it was diagnosed late, or that there's been some sort of gradual understanding, and by then it's a rush to chemo or a rush to certain procedures. That again, early intervention in medicine is almost is what you need. And I think that's what everyone is striving towards. And that's the fascination with this. And if I talk about or ask about the history of this, I mean, Ward, you alluded to some of this being almost around for a while, but its application, and now, as expected with advances in technology, it's adjusted. But talk about the history of MagSense and its almost origins and how it's been developing.
Yeah. So as I was saying, the concept of imaging an iron particle has been around. We've that used it off-label with MRI for
Mm.
quite some time. It's actually used as a treatment for anemia, for other things like that. So there's a drug out there that people are able to use and research, and we know the principles and kind of how these particles behave. Um, what's unique about MagSense is really we've won the kind of precision and repeatability of the particles themselves, so that we know how big they are, we can administer them properly, track them properly. But also it's that targeting that we're able to do by coding these particles, and making them go where they need to go. What's really interesting, I think, about the path of the company and the history of the technology was that originally the company was focused on building a new type of quasi, I'd say, imaging device, a magnetic device for locating these very specifically. Um, the challenge with that is, if you've ever brought anything new, especially a new device, into the clinical setting, it's incredibly hard to get adoption. Things like operational issues, space, then training people, getting someone to get new equipment, having a new capital budget. That can be really difficult. But what we found through a lot of the kind of preclinical work and early work through like the phase 1 trial, was that these things showed up incredibly well on MRI. And MRI is incredibly ubiquitous. I think there's 12,000 systems in the US alone. Um, and this works across field strength. So we're not having to look at, just kind of the most specialized high-end equipment. So all of a sudden that realization really opens up the market potential, because now the number of sites that could use this, just anyone with an MRI machine.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what led us down the path to where we are today, of really focusing on using MRI and just focusing on the development of the imaging agent itself.
And I mean, again, Susan, you joined late November, and I can imagine you'd sort of been seeing stuff about Imagion Biosystems previously. But when you're talking about, I mean, your mission, as you've talked about, is all about helping women with cancer. And I know I've got the website. You're the founder of curingwomen'scancer.org, which I'm sure that's well, again, helping women all over the world, ideally, but it's a difficult task. But this interest, and why did you become so interested in it and decided to jump on board and see the potential in it?
Watching women go through this journey for 30 years of my life, um, with all of the agonies that are associated with that, there has to be a faster way. There has to be a better way. And if we just look at the history, so this guy Halstead, Dr. Halstead at Hopkins, where I worked for many years, did the first radical mastectomy in 1894-ish. The dates vary, right? Radical mastectomy was removing breast, muscle, everything to the chest wall and the axilla. The results and the quality of life were abysmal for women. And yet it took us 100 years to change that. And in 1971, we did the first comparisons of radical mastectomy to modified radical mastectomy, where we were able to leave the muscle in place and do less damage. So this has been a slow process. Now, as we look in 2025, we're doing lumpectomies, meaning we're just removing the tumors. We have all kinds of oncoplastic techniques that allow reconstruction to occur. And the axilla is part of this. And in this product right now, we're speaking about the axilla. And full axillary node dissection has horrible consequences for women. Uh, Many 33% or more of women end up with arm swelling, huge arm swelling that is means that they cannot use their arm and it's painful. And they wear gloves and sleeves and all kinds of things. We evolve that to sentinel node biopsy, as I said in our patient example, which leads only to about 8% of lymphedema, but 23% of women end up with complications. So as we're looking more and more about how does the axilla relate to outcomes in breast cancer, what we know now, based on studies in the early 20s, is do we really need to understand the axilla in order to fully treat a patient? And how does exploring doing surgery in the axilla help with survival? And what we're learning is in cancers less than 2 centimeters in size, if we had a very targeted imaging that allowed us to know whether those nodes are positive for cancer spread or not, we could leave the axilla alone. And MagSense is part of this. MagSense is a step in this direction. I've said with MRI, breast MRI and contrast imaging, we get a good look at the axilla. But if a woman's had COVID or the flu or a vaccine or literally even a hangnail or lymphoma, there's so many overlaps that the surgical oncology and radiation oncology teams can't, they can't fully trust what we're doing for imaging. So as we bring this technology forward, what we're doing is eliminating many of the false alarms, and we're allowing better understanding of the normal variation in lymph nodes. And we're taking the subjectivity out of this and putting in the ability to be much more accurate and direct personalized care.
Mm. And I mean, I've known with speaking with a few companies in this space, the pipeline, or how to say, realization of developing this and getting through phases is quite extensive. And for a lot of the miners that I speak with, it's within months. Whereas I know the biotech scene, this can be quite a few years, if not multiples of years. And can you just talk a little bit, Ward, about what currently you have managed to achieve? And I know there was a funding late last year, 2024, what that capital is going to be intended to use to take it to that next stage, especially with some of the pipelines and the, I guess, areas that you're focusing in on.
To your point, the process for bringing a new drug to market through the US FDA or through any regulatory body is quite long and involves a lot of different discrete steps where you're having to prove scientific validation of safety, of efficacy, of what your impact is. So you're starting with preclinical work and animal models, moving into a phase 1 study, phase 2, phase 3, and then ultimately into the market. Each time kind of growing that patient cohort, growing kind of your study size, and showing kind of different hurdles. Each time that you go through one of those stages, though, it significantly de-risks the technology and the market potential. And that's kind of how I look at it. Is we've got this huge number of patients that are out there that we can treat. Our ability to treat them only becomes a higher probability each time we go through one of these phases. So far with our HER2 indication, we've completed all the preclinical work, done kind of all that early scientific development, and successfully completed the phase 1 study, which allowed us to understand a lot of kind of the safety and tolerability profile. So we passed all of that. And then also kind of acting as a proof of concept for the product itself. So what we were able to show was that in the patient cohort in the phase 1, that there was a detectable and differentiable magnetic signal. So that really says, okay, yes, this can be used clinically. This does tell us something important that we can let us go down to the next phase. So right now, where we are is that we're preparing for that next kind of big milestone, which is our phase 2 study, which is going to let us look at kind of dose optimization, further kind of safety information, but also really start to look at the diagnostic performance of the MagSense particle. To get there, the first thing that we need to go through is our investigational new drug application, the IND application. It's sort of the FDA saying, like, yes, you have the approval to go forward into this next phase of study. So that's really what we're focused on right now. And what this funding round is really allowing us to achieve. So within there's a number of different things that we have to do. We, have to design the study protocol, engage our investigators, and engage the clinical sites, start manufacturing, which is something that we've already got the green light to do and have the schedule started for that. So all of these things are things that over the next several months that we'll be achieving. Our goal is that sometime in late summer, we'll be ready to submit that IND application, and then hopefully start the phase 2 sometime after that. I don't want to make any promises on FDA timelines. But, everything is progressing, really nicely. Outside of that as well, there's a number of other milestones that we hope to achieve, related both to the HER2 product, but also to the company in general. I mentioned coming from an MRI background. The first thing I saw was that, one, this has a lot of potential. This is really cool, but man, we can really improve these images, not just in terms of improving their
Right.
readability and kind of how they present to the radiologist, but also in the kind of data, the quantitative data that we're able to extract from the images. There's a number of new imaging techniques that, through a lot of kind of practical research, that now are really able to be applied across almost any MR system that's out there, that allow us to understand what's going on in the image at more than just kind of a visual level, but that each pixel is going to tell us some part of information about what's going on there, about what that piece of anatomy is doing, whether it's concentration of iron or in our case, but you can measure all sorts of stuff using quantitative MRI. So we're also doing a study working with, I thought we were going to be able to announce the name by this time, but not quite, but with one of the leading MR physics sites in the US to do that work, to do the image optimization. Ultimately, what that's going to let us do is set the stage so that when we go through the phase 2 study, go through that phase 3 study, and we collect all this patient information, now we've really got the feedstock, the material to develop those AI and algorithmic tools for interpreting these images. So that's also a very exciting step. And then beyond that, really, we're going to be advancing the preclinical work for those other indications, preparing them for their own IND submissions, so that we can bring them through the regulatory process, again, further opening up the market potential for the company.
So each of them, as expected, has to be applied through individually every time to the FDA, which means
Yep.
that you sort of have to not prioritize, but there's reality, as you said, being a small cap of figuring out which one is potentially got the most specialization in to go after, because I've seen some of the TGA is what we call it in Australia, and that's very rigorous. I don't know, the FDA is almost the pinnacle of sort of processes and applications to go through. So have you got further on from that? I can imagine there's quite a substantial pipeline of the strategy or the next steps going into 2026, 27. Have you got any indication as to how far out you're looking in regards to sort of rolling this phase 2 out and then the inevitable or potential phase 3, etc.?
It's still a number of years, I'd say, until that we get through the phase 3 study. I mean, if you look at the phase 2, it takes 12 plus months on its own. Then you've got to prepare for the phase 3, which is going to be longer than that. So, you're a number of years out until actually being on market with any single indication. But this is just the process for these types of products and drugs. So that's not surprising, or I think anything that should be a scare. The market potential is very large. I mean, if you look at combined between the 3 indications that we have in the pipeline so far, and there's millions of patients just in the US alone. And to your point, the US FDA is like the pinnacle of the regulatory framework. And what's good about that is once you go through the FDA, it does make that work easier as you go into other markets. You've kind of done your homework.
Yeah.
So you're not having to restart or recreate the wheel every time you go somewhere new. But every one of these will require its own process, and we hope that we get some partners along the way to help make that happen. As you say, we're a small company. We have to really prioritize what we're able to get done with the amount of capital that we have at the time. That really just gets us to that next milestone and kind of proves what we've been working on and de-risks this company further. So I think that's something we've been able to do fairly well.
And speaking of research and collaborations, are there any already that you've sort of ticked off on, or is that still the process you're going through of bringing in sort of high-level researchers? I mean, Susan, you're probably a fantastic one to bring in as well in November, but more so that universities or research labs and some of those to, as you said, help de-risk, but also validate that what the company is doing is bringing on various arms and strengths to sort of help with the progress.
From the good news, at least for her too, is that a lot of it, or that real R&D scientific work has been done. It's been proven, and now it's
Mm.
really about clinical development. So finding the right strategic partners, finding other kind of ancillary partners that can help improve the imaging parameters, improve the kind of the software interpretation, whatever it may be. So we're talking with several companies right now. One that we do have a formal partnership with is Siemens, who is the leading MRI manufacturer in the world. So we have a collaboration agreement with them, both in terms of helping to make sure that our protocols are optimized, that we run correctly across their system, running site support. They're very helpful with early stage companies like ours. We have a few other partnerships that are in the works that we're going to be able to announce fairly soon. So stay tuned for that. And then we are talking with, going back more towards the research side, clinical researchers in the areas of prostate and ovarian. And again, those are all sort of news tidbits I think we'll be able to announce as we go forward through the year.
Mm. There's a fair bit to be coming over the 2025 and well and truly is the future. But I can imagine alongside yourself, Ward, and Susan, you're probably now speaking with them quite frequently, is a larger team or sort of a management team. Can you sort of talk to us about who else is involved alongside of you and maybe a little bit about what they've also done in their, I guess, background and involvement in the company as well?
Certainly, that's somewhere we've made, God, even just in the past few months, just really great strides in terms of adding very experienced people, kind of on regulatory affairs and consulting, quality and safety and medical writing, medical affairs advisors. So really rounding out that complete team, people who have deep experience in the industry, people who've worked with the company before and know the technology, people with strong ties to the FDA and to various institutions. So the team has really started to take shape and grown tremendously, I think. Yeah, I mean, we're still a very small company.
Mm.
We're trying to be very capital efficient. We're not running a big in-house operation or anything like that. But we've been able to be very smart about who we engage and how we engage them to really advance this going forward. So also, I'd say you could look for some additional announcements coming forward as we kind of roll some of those new team members out to the public.
Mm. And from as it always comes back to for a lot of people, the investing side of it and just understanding what they can expect and anticipate is more news flow and more research and more of this comes to light. I mean, what are some of the key announcements and decisions that investors can anticipate coming out on the ASX over the course of the next 6 to 12 months?
I think certainly I mentioned a few of those sort of
Mm.
intermediate steps to get to the IND. The IND is going to be a major announcement, but announcing our manufacturing partner and that we've kind of started that process is something that we've already done. Going forward, looking at announcing our first few clinical sites and our principal investigators is another very important step. Choosing the CRO and starting that process. Announcing the protocol optimization and the results of that. And then finally kind of tying all of that together into the IND submission. So there'll be a significant amount of news flow coming forward over the next several months as we get towards that IND submission.
Hmm. And Susan, as we've talked about, this is something close to your heart, and I think there's probably going to be listeners on the other side of this that are going through this or have known someone that's going through this. I mean, seeing and knowing your experience within this field, I mean, what do you see this hopefully transforming and helping with, particularly women in the future potentially cancer diagnosis, and what would be some key takeaways for them to remember about this conversation today?
I think in the work I'm doing with curing women's cancer and other projects, democratization of care is critical. And one way that we can do that with MagSense is that we can actually put a number. We have not done this yet, but it is very possible to do. Put a number on the amount of uptake the nodes in breast cancer have with the HER2 marker, with the iron. So let me try to explain that a little bit better. The MR signal changes as MagSense enters the lymph node. And we've done this for decades in CT. We can actually measure that change. It's called a region of interest. So we can measure the signal change for this. When you can put a number on something, and again, we've done this in CT, we know fluid versus fat versus muscle versus bone. And we can do that same thing with MagSense. And what that allows us to do is also open the opportunity for artificial intelligence to help us in this interpretation. So again, I've spoken a lot about let's eliminate false alarms. Let's increase accuracy. As I said, democratization. People who have more or less training, people have more or less experience, can still have a very high level of accuracy with this tool. And and I um, and I know Ward cautions me. I always think to the future. When this just imagine this is being injected intravenously in the future. I am in the future. It's being injected intravenously and therefore found um, in as an early detection tool, not just for lymph nodes. Lung cancers, near and dear to my heart, are often diagnosed late because there is no screening. Pancreatic cancers, ovarian cancers, they're diagnosed late because there isn't screening. In the future, could this bring us a different view of the world and the accuracy and precision assisted by artificial intelligence and measurements? So Ward cautions me on this. I am not saying this is happening now, but it is a vision for the world of cancer that I want to be part of. And if time is short, now's the time to start working on it.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, Susan. And I know it's a ways off and it is the future, but that is what excites me about it. But even if you look at today, when we talk about the practicality of this, and you use the term, democratization of healthcare, that just means making sure that everybody who has the condition can get access to this care. You don't have to be in a major, U.S. metropolitan market to get this, or, be right next to the pet facility with a nuclear pharmacy that has such a tight turnaround on the use of that agent. This is something that can be used on any MR system, that can be stored easily in any hospital pharmacy. The shelf, goes in the fridge. This is something that's so practical and easy and can impact so many lives because of that. It's not something that's so specialized and delicate that, it's only going to be centered around very highly specialized care centers that only there's a few radiologists in the world to know how to use it. That's what really excites me in the near term with this.
Yeah, I think, and again, I can say personally from having a dad as a doctor, is the constant ringing in medicine is that, yeah, earlier intervention is almost the pinnacle in what medicine strives to. And I think we know, especially with AI, and it's quite interesting hearing you both talk about the prevalence and the growth of it, because over the last 12 months, I don't think anyone's quite understood how these can be applied, and in particular into the medical field. I think some people go to Skynet, and others go to sort of help me with my school homework. But there's going to be such an evolving landscape, and the ability to integrate AI into some of this technology is just going to eliminate human error and improve, as you said, efficiencies and detection, because that's like the last thing we want is for someone to be false positive or undiagnosed because of some other sort of complication. And if this is the potential to eliminate that, it's better for everyone, not just in America, but hopefully the whole world, which is,
Yes.
a super powerful thing.
And to have a small company focused on patients, right?
Mm,
The focus here is patient care. And how do we improve that? And that's really important
mm,
to drive the best pathway for that individual patient is 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 really a gift. And that's what this group is working on. Very
And
important.
I can imagine there may be a few listeners on the other side, or watchers, I should say, that potentially have questions or want to follow the company and reach out and ask questions. I mean, where can they go to keep an eye on the upcoming news flows, but potentially, research
Mhm.
themselves and email either both of you ask questions? Where can they go?
Well, certainly on our website, imagionbio.com. Our LinkedIn is also a great spot where we post a lot of our news. And then if you want to get in touch with us, reaching out by email, info@imagionbio.com. That's IMAGION bio, just to be clear. Here you'll have a little bar there.
I will. It'll be included in the description, but it's
Yeah,
always good to just spell it
link
out.
in the
Otherwise,
bio.
everyone's sort of, I guess, representation of it. But yeah, I appreciate both of you coming on and speaking about this. It's I've absolutely learned a lot about it. This whole realm of bioscience and cancer, and in particular what MagSense is looking to achieve and pioneer, if I could say those words, is fascinating, and it's not going to be something that's changed overnight. It's a journey. It's an extended period of time, but the light at the end of the tunnel is the potential to be amazing. And I appreciate you both coming on the show and speaking with me. And I'm looking forward to touching base in a handful of months, and maybe when you do have this submission to the FDA about the next stage of the phase 2 study to give us a more update and see what's happening. But yeah, thank you both for taking the time to speak with me today.
Yeah, thank you, Ben, and we'll certainly keep you posted. We have a lot of exciting news coming out in the next few months, so I'll look forward to talking to you again down the road.
Yeah, pleasure. Wonderful, wonderful discussion. Thank you, Ben.
Thanks for listening to the Marketbull podcast. Please remember that the topics and stocks discussed in this podcast are not financial advice. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to like, share, and follow. You can follow the Marketbull on all our socials and keep up to date with global market insights.